my electoral tree, built with all of your help, on the night of November 5th, will fall on George Gascon. George Gascon, as you said, Cora, will finally be gone, and we can set about the important task of restoring our safety in this community.
Yes.
Thank you. I mentioned Gascon, the dogs go crazy. So, the DA's office. Why should you care about who is the DA? Turns out in our society, the LA County DA is an enormously powerful position. The DA actually is a governing body of one person. DA takes no orders from the governor, from the attorney general, from the mayor of the city council, the board of supervisors, the sheriff, or the police chief. Gascon proved that on his first day in office, his first hour, literally his first email, where he issued 9 special directives that turned the course of criminal justice in our society towards the benefit of criminals and away from victims. And I can do literally just the opposite that quickly.
Yay.
Yeah. And to give you, again, the idea of the DA's position, the DA is in charge of 2,100 employees. 750 of them right now are prosecutors. DA is in charge of $460 million budget and basically 180,000 criminal cases every single year. If the DA was a state in the United States, it would be the 11th largest state, and I would be actually the Attorney General of the 11th largest state. That is how big the LA County DA's office is. As a local prosecuting office, it is the biggest in the United States. So it matters. I mean, sure, the president, on the ballot matters, the Senate matters, but nothing will matter more to your immediate safety for you and your family than the position of the district attorney. So why am I running for district attorney? Well, lifelong Angelino. Born here, grew up here, married now 31 years. Have raised my 3 kids who are now in their 20s here in Los Angeles. And quite candidly, I'm not going to have a guy come in from San Francisco after he's destroyed the public safety there, come to LA, try to destroy our public safety, and get me to leave, or my family to leave, or any of you to leave LA County. Because that has been one of the reactions that people have had over the last 3.5 years. It wasn't the high taxes, it wasn't the traffic, the smog, or the earthquakes. It was fear. Fear to go outside for not just you, but your family, your kids, your grandkids, your parents or grandparents. Fear that it's not just, by the way, going outside at night. It's fear during the day. Fear to go to a downtown area, and now you got to give some thought, do you want to wear a watch or carry a purse? Then when you get back to your car, you're worried, is today the day I'm the statistic, where my car is going to be on the Nextdoor app or the Citizen app with someone smashing it and breaking in? And if you successfully get to your car, now you're worried about when you go home. My wife, we have Ring cameras around my house. My wife won't go in the house unless she's checked all the Ring cameras to make sure no one's actually there. But that is now a common occurrence. And I would venture to say that everyone here has either experienced crime themselves as a friend or a relative or certainly a neighbor that in the last 3.5 years has experienced some level of crime that you didn't experience before. And so when I decide to run for the DA's office, I look at it and I say, I'm not going to move. I'm not going to let Gascon get me to leave Los Angeles, a county that I love, that you folks love. Because, that one reaction is leaving, second reaction is just complaining, but the third reaction is what you have done and what I am doing, which is you want to do something about it. You're doing something about it, by the way, is learning something about the DA's position, the DA's race, meeting a candidate, hopefully supporting that candidate, and making the change that way. And by the way, thank you. Thank you all for being here. Thank you ultimately for being my ambassador. Because if this message makes sense to you, we have, 52 days to go before the election, but the ballots are going to come out in about 30 days before that election. That means 22 days from now, people will start having ballots in their homes. So I will need you to be my ambassadors out there. I mean, there's probably about, let's call it 50 people here today, but if each one of you tells 10 friends, your social media, your text, your emails, all the meetings and conversations you're going to have in the next 52 days, 50 people becomes 50,000 people. And if any of you hit an influencer or two, 50,000 people become 500,000 people. And that's the way that this message on this beautiful morning, and I say beautiful because I am not sweating to death as I was about a week ago, really just amplifies to almost 500,000 people if each one of you hit your friends and they hit their friends, and so on and so on. So, what when you actually get out there and you talk about the DA's race, what can you tell people? Well, you can tell people what George Gascon has done to us. So let's go back to that first day, that first hour, that first email. Now, if you're George Gascon, you're coming to Los Angeles in December of 2020 from San Francisco, and you actually lack something very important, prosecutorial experience. I'm glad most of you are sitting down, because the ones who aren't are about to learn something that's shocking. George Gascon has never prosecuted a case himself in his whole career, but he's been the DA of San Francisco and LA. George Gascon has never defended a criminal case in his entire career. And he comes in that first day, and he's talking to, at that point, over 800 prosecutors. And they have collectively thousands of years of experience. Now, you would assume when someone's coming in without experience and they're meeting this great, talented group of prosecutors, they would say, hey guys, what's working? What's not working? How can we keep and scale up what's working, and how can we fix what's not? He had no desire to this day to talk to the bulk of the prosecutors in his office. I don't know if you folks are just intimidating and you scare him. I don't know if he's incredibly insecure and he realizes that he's talking to the real deal when he talks to prosecutors with decades of experience. Who knows what's going on in George Gascon's head? But he didn't do it. And as a result, those 9 special directives were blanket policies because he didn't trust the prosecutors. He said, I'm not even going to give you discretion to go ahead and do what I'm about to tell you about. I'm going to command you not to do the following. You are hereby prohibited from prosecuting a juvenile, someone under 18, who's stealing just under $950. And that is now putting a license to steal sign in front of every CVS, every Walgreens, every 7-Eleven. My brother, who's here today, and I went and met with 100 franchisee owners of 7-Elevens. Turns out that every 7-Eleven you see is not corporate owned. They're actually owned by individuals who have invested their life savings to have the ability to have what usually is a profitable 7-Eleven. Turns out that they're no longer profitable. They can't even sell them. And these 100 franchisee owners were coming and looking at me, and they were saying, look, we don't even bother to call the police anymore when someone comes in here and just grabs a bunch of stuff and walks out. Because the police have told us we can't prosecute because the DA's office won't prosecute. And then I said, well, what about an insurance claim? Can't you file an insurance claim? They almost laughed at me. They said the deductible on our policy will eat up most of the loss, and if we file the claim, they'll cancel the policy. I looked at that, and they're looking back at me, and we're like, they're shaking their heads, and I'm saying, look, hold on till November 5th. Help is on the way. In fact, one guy then pulled out his WhatsApp and showed me a video of a guy stealing basically $10 worth of beer. And when he told the guy, hey, you owe me $10, the guy flips him a $5 bill. And he says, no, it's $10. And the guy said, you should be lucky I'm giving you any money at all. That is the culture of lawlessness that George Gascon's policies have now produced. And it starts small. It starts with 1 or 2 people going into a 7-Eleven. But it then grows. Because those people say, hey, there's no punishment in our society. They tell their friends, or they share their social media. All of a sudden you got 10 people going into a CVS. Then you got 100 people literally doing a flash mob in a 7-Eleven. Then you have smash and grab robbers, you have car break-ins, you have home break-ins, and you have a guy getting shot over his catalytic converter in downtown LA. That's where all this goes. That's how a spiral of lawlessness keeps growing and growing. And we can stop it. We can literally cut off that spiral of lawlessness and just say we're going to go back to accountability. And let me tell you what I mean by accountability, because I'm going to be accused, you're going to hear this, of Nathan Hochman wants to reinstitute mass incarceration policies and literally put every black and Latino person in jail. I'm here to tell you nothing could be further from the truth. What I reject are extreme policies. Extreme George Gascon decarceration policies, because that's what he calls them. Those are policies that say we're not going to prosecute violent and serious criminals to the full extent of the law. We're not going to enact the gang enhancement in most cases if someone someone is part of a gang as part of committing a violent act. We're not going to impose the gun enhancement in most cases if they use a gun as part of an act. That's decarceration policies. I reject those. But I also reject mass incarceration blanket policies. Those failed as well. Where I come down is the middle, and I actually call it the hard middle because it requires work. You got to look at each case individually. You got to look at each defendant, the defendant's background, the crime committed, and the impact on the victim to determine who our true threats are to our public safety and need to be behind bars, and quite honestly, the ones that aren't. Your first-time nonviolent offender, if they violated society's laws, they have to pay their debt back to society. But that might be the situation where it's community service. Go pick up trash on the side of the road if you're a first-time nonviolent offender. Restitution, you still pay it back. Or if you've got a serious drug addiction, we'll give you a diversion opportunity that says you can either go to jail or you can go through an 18-month rigorous rehab program. And if you can make it through, we will wipe out your record at the end of it. Right. Those are the non-prison alternatives that you can offer in the appropriate case. But that is, again, a rejection of the extremes and an application of the hard middle. And by the way, this hard middle approach is not new. Every single prosecutor that is here understands exactly what I'm saying. Because that's what prosecutors have done for decades until George Gascon showed up. So we can go ahead and implement this type of policy. And what is the ultimate goal? Because the other thing about George Gascon, he said, I want to fill the prisons to the breaking point. I'm here to tell you that filling the prisons to the breaking point is the failure of the criminal justice system. Literally. The truly effective criminal justice system deters criminals from committing crimes in the first place. Right. Now, you might say to me, do we have to go back to the 1960s or the 70s to make this happen? No. We need to go back to 2014. 2014, just 10 years ago, was considered our safest year in the last 50 years. So what was going right in 2014? That's not going right in 2024. Well, let's start with the DA. The DA back then was doing her job. That was Jackie Lacey. Law enforcement understood that if the DA's got to be DA's your partner in the mission, that they're going to go ahead and do their job, and they were. Victims understood that if you dialed 911, not only would someone pick up the phone, but actually you could get justice for the harm you suffered. And as importantly, criminals understood where the lines are. And the lines are the laws. And they were being consistently, fairly, and impartially enforced, and there were real consequences on the other side. So what happened in 2014? In record numbers, criminals were not committing crimes, thereby saving a whole lot of victims in the process. That's the goal. The goal is to go back and say, look, to these criminals, I'm dead serious. I'm not going to move the lines in your favor. Here are the consequences, and I'm not bluffing. As my brother will tell you, having played poker with me many times, I don't bluff well. I learned a long time ago just to not bluff, and I certainly don't bluff about criminal justice decisions. And that will be the message that I will be taking out to the criminals. And who am I going to have to work with to make this message stick and make this message effective and bring back safety in this community? Three important groups: the prosecutors, law enforcement, and victims. So let's start with the prosecutors. Here's my message to all you prosecutors in the audience and all the ones that I've had the pleasure of speaking with over the last 3.5 months. I view when I ask myself, what is the greatest asset of the DA's office? It's not the computers, the cases, or the courtrooms. It's the deputy district attorneys, the prosecutors doing the work in every courtroom across this county every day for us, along with the Bureau of Investigation investigators and the support staff. So then what does that mean my job is? My job is to maximize the greatest asset, which is that. So if they need training, let's get them all the training they need. They need resources, let's get them resources. If they do an incredibly great job and they win the case, they should be getting the accolades and the glory from it. Now, if any of you that's okay. Because you've obviously seen a George Gascon press conference. And a George Gascon press conference only has, well, George Gascon and nobody else. You would swear to God he investigated the case, tried the case, convicted the people, sentenced the people all by himself. Because he's got no one else up there. And what I have committed to the prosecutors is that if you do great work, you will get the success. And I've jokingly said that unless there's some prosecutors who are camera shy, I truly have yet to meet that person. Yeah, they'll be up there with me. And let me tell you the logic behind it. Because right now, the DA's office is down 200 attorneys. We're not just talking, and there's actually one here who's recently retired. And we're talking not just 200 attorneys, these are 200 seasoned, experienced attorneys that decided enough is enough, I can't work for Gascon anymore. So I need the people who are in the office to work harder than they've ever worked before. There are over 10,000 unfiled cases out there. That's a lot of victims who've been waiting months or years for their day of justice. We got to process those cases. You know, you've got a situation. So you've got a situation where we're going to actually ask everybody who's there to really, we're not just 100%, we're like at 123% of effort we're going to need to dig out of this hole. But what I am absolutely convinced is a couple things. You know, people say, well, are you going to have to replace people in the audience, in the office? Look, other than the deputy public defenders that George Gascon has brought in, which is insane, I know that 98% of the prosecutors in the office voted to support George Gascon's recall. This is my team that I will work with not only on day one, hopefully even before day one, so we get ready for day one. And I'm going to say that to the team, look, you're going to be up there with me. And then when your friends see I'm serious, they're going to want to be up there with me. And then when those people who are now applying to Orange County, San Bernardino, Riverside, when they see that the LA County DA's office is back, I mean, it used to be the gold standard by which all other DA's offices were measured. Now, sadly, it is the butt of late-night comedians' jokes. That will not happen if I'm the district attorney. We will go back to being the best or striving to be the best. That is the only standard that is allowed. You know, George Gascon, when he is confronted with his assistant, it says 2/3 of the people today feel less safe than they did when he came into office. He says, well, Los Angeles is no worse than, and he feels in a major city, Miami, Chicago, St. Louis, Detroit. I told these prosecutors today, I've told them in the past, I will keep telling them, no worse than is not my standard. It will never be my standard. We will either be the best or we'll be striving to be the best, and that's it. And that's how I'm absolutely convinced we can get it off. And if we take that esprit de corps, and now we translate that over to law enforcement, that's how you get law enforcement. Quite candidly, their numbers are down by thousands. They are demoralized because they've been bringing cases to the DA's office for the last 3.5 years, and the DA's office has rejected so many of them or just left them on file. Why? Well, it wasn't because of the facts. It wasn't because of the law. It was because the DA has a personal political agenda. It says that certain crimes and certain criminals will not be prosecuted. So I'll take my esprit de corps that we've now built with the prosecutors, go back to law enforcement and say, we're back in business. You do the hard work, build that case up, bring it to the DA's office, and we will absolutely give it a fair look. And then when you have to now report back to victims as to what's going on, you can say the DA's office is doing its job again. And that then leaves the third group, victims. This is in some ways the most tragic group that George Gascon has abandoned. Because imagine, I'll give you one example. For decades, literally, when there was a parole hearing, let me explain what a parole hearing happens. You have a victim family that has suffered a relative who has been murdered. It could be a son, a daughter, a parent. Now they're going to confront the murderer at a parole hearing where the murderer has his or her own lawyer, and the murderer is trying to get out of prison early. And there's a parole board. Well, for decades, the DA's office would send a prosecutor with the victim family in order to not just comfort the victim family, but to actually get access to the information being considered by the parole board to make sure that they get the proper arguments on behalf of the victim family. Remember that first day, first hour, first email? That's another thing Gascon got rid of. He said prosecutors could no longer go with victim families to parole hearings when they're confronting the murderers. Now let me tell you how this backfired on Dear George. Right after that so on March 5th, there was a primary, 12 people running. Now it's just myself and George Gascon. I got a call from Max and Rory Kennedy. Max and Rory Kennedy are two of Robert F. Kennedy's 11 children. Robert F. Kennedy, as you'll recall, was assassinated in Los Angeles in 1968 by a guy named Sirhan Sirhan. Well, for 40 years, Sirhan Sirhan had been up for parole hearings. And in each one of those 15 parole hearings, the DA's office sent a prosecutor with the Kennedy family, and in each situation, the parole board denied parole. Enter George Gascon, 2022, another parole hearing, the 16th parole hearing. He forbids prosecutors to go with the Kennedy family. Sure enough, the parole board, for the first time ever, grants parole to Sirhan Sirhan, and it actually took Governor Newsom to come in to reverse that grant of parole to keep Sirhan Sirhan behind bars. So how does that affect myself in this race? Well, right after the March 5th primary, when I get through, enter this phone call with Max and Roy Kennedy. Now, at the time, I thought that my brother here was punking me. That he thought it would be funny to pretend to be the Kennedys and call me and congratulate me or something like that. Well, it turns out he doesn't have that great a sense of humor. Sorry, my brother. But it really was the Kennedys. And they described this, they tell me what they just described, or I just described to you, and they said, we are going to endorse you against George Gascon. I said, that's fantastic. And they said, no, you don't understand. We have never endorsed an independent. And I'm running as an independent against a Democrat ever. I said, well, thank you so much. And they said, no, you really don't understand. We're not just going to do it on this phone call, Ms. Gretel. We're not just going to do it on this phone call. We want to have a... No, I'll come back and say. We want to have a public press conference. And I said, well, where do you want to do it? And they said, where does George Gascon work? And I said, well, funny you should say that. He works in the Hall of Justice downtown. And sure enough, we had a very public press conference. And the Kennedys couldn't have been stronger. And they articulated one of the biggest themes of my campaign. They said to everybody there, look, it's not about politics. It's not about Democrat. It's not about independent. It's not about Republican. For our DA, we need someone who has experience. And Nathan has 34 years experience as a federal prosecutor, a U.S. Assistant Attorney General, a defense attorney, and the president of the LAC Ethics Commission. George Gascon has zero experience. George Gascon has a record of public safety failure with violent crimes, property crimes, hate crimes, fentanyl poisonings, even human trafficking up double or triple digits. I mean, shoplifting is up 133%. So they said basically, look, we are going to back not anything dealing with politics, but the most experienced person who can get the job done. They said that would be Nathan Hochman. And that theme has been echoed by over 100 different endorsements. Law enforcement, firefighters, lifeguards, prison guards, restaurant association, over 70 elected leaders, half Democrat, half Republican. I've got all my opponents, most of Democrats, 3 of whom work for George Gascon, have endorsed me. Someone like Rick Caruso came in and endorsed me, and interesting enough, Rick Caruso endorsed George Gascon back in 2020. But he had a very public press conference and said, look, made a mistake. I gave that guy 3.5 years to show us what he could do, and he's absolutely failed. And he very publicly has come out in support of myself. So how am I going to win this race? George Gascon on election night, primary election night, got 25% of the vote. a historic low for a DA seeking re-election. My job has been to unify 75% of people who rejected George Gascon. And they come from every political dimension, ultra-left liberals to independents to far-right Republicans, black, white, Latino, Asian, every religious group in every part of this county. Literally from Long Beach to Palos Verdes to Los Angeles to Lancaster, from Santa Monica to the San Gabriel, San Fernando, and Santa Clarita Valleys. I have put thousands of miles on my car. I have been places that I mean, it's actually been a wonderful journey, fascinating, meeting people you would never otherwise meet. And these people are upset. These people are frustrated. Because I will tell you that all these folks, they don't agree on a lot, but they do agree on a couple of very important things. Number one, George Gascon has failed them. Number two, they feel much less safe today than they did when he came into office. And number three, they want change, and when they get to know anything about me, they believe that I can get the job done. So let me stop there. I'm going to be taking some questions now. And by the way, I'm not a politician. Ask any question you want. But this election, I would argue, is one of the most important elections, especially for your safety, that we have had in a long time. And if what I'm saying makes sense, and you can help get that message out, that is how we are going to crush George Gascon on election night and truly restore our safety after November 5th. So let me stop there.